Didn't say a word when his mother called my paycheck our little safety net. He just refilled his coffee. My name is Juno. I'm 32, a licensed occupational therapist, and for 4 years I was the kind of wife who kept the lights on and said nothing about it. My husband, I'll call him my husband because that's all he was by the end, worked in commercial HVAC sales. Good months, bad months, feast and famine, the kind of income that sounds fine on paper until you realize the paper is yours and the pen keeps moving without you. His mother, who lived 40 minutes north of us in the house she'd inherited outright and still managed to complain about constantly, had opinions about money the way some people have opinions about sports. Loud. Personal. Completely uninformed. The first time she asked what I made, I thought it was awkward small talk. We were at her kitchen table. She'd made her signature pot roast, the one she mentioned by name every time she served it, and I was being polite. I said something vague about working in healthcare. She pressed. I deflected. She smiled the way you smile when you already know the answer and just want to watch you squirm through giving it. My husband told her later that night. I found out 3 weeks after because she mentioned my annual salary in a group text about vacation planning, not an approximation, the exact number. That was year 1. I want to be precise here, because I know how these stories can sound. Hysterical, exaggerated, the kind of thing people half believe. So let me be specific. I'm not telling you she was a monster. I'm telling you she was strategic. There's a difference. Monsters are obvious. Strategic people make you doubt your own perception. She never asked for money directly. Not once. What she did was create a language around it. She talked about the family as a unit with shared resources. She used the word we the way people use copyright, to claim ownership of something they didn't make. When my husband's car needed new tires, she mentioned in passing that she hoped we could help. When she wanted to redo her deck, the deck on the house she owned outright, she sent my husband a Pinterest board and a HUS estimate with no subject line. Just the number, $4,200. He paid half without telling me. I found out the way I found out everything. Later. The thing about being the higher earner in a marriage is that nobody tells you what it actually means until you're already in it. People assume it means power. It doesn't. It means exposure. You're the one whose name is on the direct deposit. You're the one whose overdraft protection gets quietly tested. You're the one who gets to feel generous when you don't object, and unreasonable when you finally do. I had been told my whole life that being capable was a virtue. I had not been told that in the wrong household, capability is an invitation. I want to tell you I saw the pattern early. I didn't. What I saw were individual incidents, each one just small enough to dismiss. $20 here, $100 there. A Venmo request from his mother's account for something labeled household that I never agreed to. I asked my husband about it once. He said she must have sent it to the wrong person. I believed him. Not because I was naive. I'm not naive, but because I was tired and believing him was cheaper than not. By year 3, I had funded 2 rounds of car repairs for my mother-in-law's sedan, a water heater replacement she needed urgently, the same week my performance bonus hit, a semester of community college for my husband's younger brother who dropped out after 6 weeks. Christmas for 9 people because my husband volunteered us without asking, and approximately $800 in restaurant bills that somehow always landed on the card in my name. None of this was documented. That was the problem. It happened in the soft spaces, over dinner and text threads, in the comfortable assumption that I would handle it and not make it weird. The moment things shifted wasn't dramatic. It rarely is. It was a Sunday afternoon mid-October, the kind of afternoon where the light comes in low and golden and everything looks more peaceful than it is. My mother-in-law had come over for lunch. She brought a grocery bag she didn't offer to unpack, and a comment she hadn't invited to leave. We were talking, or she was talking, and I was listening the way you learn to listen when you're gathering information without letting anyone know that's what you're doing. She mentioned that her property taxes had gone up. She sighed the way people sigh when they're performing exhaustion for an audience. Then she looked at me, not my husband, me, and said, I just hope the people who have the most to give remember what family means. I set down my fork. I looked at my husband. He was looking at his plate. Something inside me moved very quietly from one place to another. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I offered her more iced tea. I walked to the kitchen and stood at the counter for 30 seconds while the refrigerator hummed, and I made a decision that had no drama attached to it whatsoever. I decided I was done operating on trust. That night after she left, I opened my laptop. I want to describe what I found without making it sound like a movie scene, because it wasn't. It was just numbers. Numbers I had not paid attention to because I had trusted the person I was supposed to trust, and that trust had been expensive. In the past 18 months, there had been 41 transfers out of our joint checking account that I could not account for. Not large, never large, between $40 and $300 each, labeled with things like utilities, mom misc, family stuff. A few were unlabeled entirely. Added up, they came to just over $6,000. $6,000 I had earned and had not spent. I sat with that number for a long time. I didn't cry. I made a list. The next morning, I called my bank before my husband woke up. I asked about options for separating accounts. I opened a new individual checking account. I had my direct deposit rerouted before lunch. I did not tell him. I want to explain why because I know how this part sounds. It sounds sneaky. It sounds like I was starting a fight without giving him a chance. But here's the thing, I had given him chances. I just hadn't called them that. Every time I asked about a Venmo charge and accepted his answer, every time I mentioned feeling like we weren't on the same page financially and let him redirect the conversation to dinner plans, every time his mother made a comment about my income and I looked at him, and he looked away, those were chances. He had used them all. I wasn't starting something new. I was finishing something he'd already decided not to address. The first time he noticed, it was 3 weeks later. He went to transfer money for an insurance payment, and the joint account balance was lower than he expected. He asked me about it. I told him I'd restructured my direct deposit. He frowned. He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I realized I didn't have a clear picture of where my money was going and I wanted one." He said, "That's kind of a big decision to make without talking to me." I said, "Yes, I learned that move from you." He didn't respond to that. He left the room and I heard him on the phone 20 minutes later, voice low, door not quite closed, and I knew who he was talking to. The next week, my mother-in-law texted me directly. Not my husband, me. "Hey, hon, just wanted to check in. Noticed the usual help hasn't come through this month? Everything okay?" I read it twice, then I screenshotted it, then I replied, "Hi, I'm actually in the process of reviewing our household finances. Going forward, any financial support would need to be a conversation between all three of us with clear terms. Happy to talk when you're ready." She did not respond for 4 days. When she did, she called my husband instead of me. I know this because he came home that evening with the particular energy of a man who has been assigned a task he doesn't want to do. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, same table where I'd been doing spreadsheets for 2 weeks, and he said his mother was upset. He said she felt blindsided. He said she relied on the consistency of our support and that pulling back without notice wasn't fair. I asked him which support he meant, the $4,000 for her car repairs last year, or the water heater, or Christmas, or the $1,800 that was labeled MISC across 14 separate transactions. He went quiet. I had the spreadsheet open on my laptop. I turned it toward him. I don't know what he expected. Maybe for me to feel embarrassed by the numbers like I'd been keeping score, but I hadn't been keeping score. I'd been paying the score. There's a difference. He looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't think it was that much." I said, "I know. I was going to pay it back." "From what?" He didn't answer. That night he slept in the guest room, not because I asked him to, because I think he needed to be somewhere he could avoid my face. The thing about a man who doesn't defend you is that he's not neutral. Neutral would be doing nothing. He had been doing something, quietly, consistently, in the direction of someone else. That's not neutral. That's a choice made in installments, small enough to feel accidental. His mother escalated 2 days later. She called me. It was a Wednesday morning. I was between clients, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the therapy practice where I work. She opened with warmth. That particular warmth that works like a tackle, the kind designed to make you feel mean for not being moved by it. She said she understood there were some concerns. She said she'd always thought of me as a daughter. She said family goes through hard times, and that's exactly when family steps up. I let her talk. When she finished, I said, "I want to make sure I understand what you're asking." You're asking me to continue financially supporting you at the same level as before. She said she wouldn't put it that way. I said, how would you put it? Silence. I said, I went back through 2 years of transactions. I have records of every transfer. I also spoke with a CPA last week about the tax implications of informal financial gifts, particularly at the amounts we're talking about. If there's a consistent pattern of transfer that could be classified as income rather than gifts, that's something that needs to be properly documented. She said, what does that mean? I said, it means I'd like everything going forward to be in writing. And I think it would be worth revisiting what's already transferred. Her voice changed. The warmth pulled back like a tide going out. She said I was being cold. She said I was changing the rules in the middle of the game. I almost laughed at that. The idea that there had been rules. Rules would have been fair. What there had been was an assumption, and it had been about me. I said, I'm not changing rules. I'm creating them for the first time. She told me she needed to think. I said that sounded great. I said I'd be in touch with documentation. I hung up and sat in my car and watched a sparrow land on a parking meter and fly away. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought I would be. I scheduled a meeting with my CPA that Friday. I'd found her 18 months ago when I'd started taking my finances more seriously. She was meticulous, a little dry, exactly who you want reviewing your money. I brought the spreadsheet. I brought screenshots. I brought the Venmo records I'd requested from the app. She looked at everything for a while. Then she looked at me. She said that while informal family gifts under the annual exclusion amount don't require a gift tax return, a documented pattern of regular transfers to the same person, especially if they exceed the annual limit cumulatively, can create a paper trail with implications. She said if his mother had received consistent financial support that could be construed as taxable income and had not reported it, that was a concern she might want to address before it became someone else's concern. I asked what I should do with that information. She said, that depends on what outcome you want. I thought about it on the drive home. I thought about the Sunday afternoons. The pot roast. The way my mother-in-law looked at my purse before she looked at my face. The way my husband reached for his water glass when I needed him to reach for me. I knew what outcome I wanted. I drafted a letter that evening. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it the way I would write a clinical note, measured, factual, unemotional. I outlined the transfers, the amounts, the dates. I stated that I considered the sum of $6,240 an informal loan that had never been formalized, and that I was formally requesting repayment on a 90-day timeline. I included a payment address. I CC'd my husband. I also attached a one-page summary from my CPA about gift tax documentation best practices. I did not send it immediately. I printed it. I read it the next morning. I sent it the day after. My husband called me at work. He said, you sent my mother a letter from a CPA. I said, I sent her a letter I wrote with a resource attached. He said, this is going to devastate her. I said, accountability is not devastation. He said I was doing this to hurt her. I said I was doing this because 4 years of absorbing financial decisions I hadn't agreed to had cost me $6,000 and whatever trust I'd had left, and I'd like at least one of those things back. He didn't call again that evening. His mother called the next morning. Not warm this time, sharp. She said the letter was an insult. She said she had never asked for anything that wasn't freely given. I reminded her of the text she'd sent asking about the usual help. She said that wasn't asking, that was checking in. I said checking in assumes there's an account to check. She said if I kept pursuing this, she'd tell her family that I was the reason things were falling apart. I said I understood, and that if she chose to do that, I'd let the documentation speak for itself. She said I was cruel. I said I spent 4 years being easy to step over. I think what you're actually responding to is that I stopped. There was a long pause. Then she hung up. The repayment timeline I'd set was 90 days. At day 38, a check arrived. Personal check, her name in the upper left corner. The amount exactly right. No note inside. No apology. Just the check. I took a photo of it before I deposited it. I don't know why. Evidence? Maybe. Or just because I needed to see it. My husband and I had a long conversation shortly after. Not a fight. Something quieter than a fight. He said he hadn't realized how much had accumulated. He said his mother had gone through a lot. He said he'd always assumed that could handle it. I said, handling it and consenting to it aren't the same thing. He said he knew that. I asked him what he planned to do about it. He said he needed time to think. I said that was fine. I also said that I needed to know, going forward, that my income was mine, until we made a joint decision together. That his family was not a joint decision I had consented to. That I would not be a resource that got drawn down quietly and thanked publicly. He said he understood. I watched his face while he said it. I was looking for something, not guilt. Guilt is easy. I was looking for comprehension, the specific kind that means a person has understood not just what you're saying, but why it took you this long to say it. I wasn't sure I found it. We're still married. I want to be honest about that because I know that's not the ending people expect from a story like this. He's not a villain. He's a man who learned a way of operating that benefited him and never examined it. Whether he can unlearn it, that's a different question, and it's one I'm still asking. What I can tell you is this. I have my own account now. My direct deposit goes where I decide. Every financial decision we make gets discussed before it gets made. His mother no longer texts me about money. She barely texts me at all, which is fine. We are cordial when we see each other. Cordial is enough. I used to think that boundaries were something you set once, in a big dramatic moment, and then you were done. I know now that they're structural. You build them the way you'd build something you need to live in. Carefully, with good materials, checking the load-bearing walls. I pay for everything in this marriage that mattered, the car, the vacations, the gap months when his sales numbers were down. I paid it without complaint because I thought love meant absorbing the weight without commenting on how heavy it was. It doesn't. Love is not a ledger, but it's also not a blank check. And the day I finally understood the difference was the day I stopped being useful and started being someone they actually had to reckon with. The spiral on the parking meter didn't mean anything. I know that. But I think about it sometimes. The way it landed for a second and then just left. No drama. No announcement. Just gone. That's the version of strong I'm working on.